It feels easy to give up on the system when you don't have immediate attainment of the goal. But when you keep up with the system, you achieve way more goals than you ever thought possible.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is my friend, Joshua Lisec, who's a ghostwriter, and we'll explain what that means in a couple moments. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is from Aldous Huxley. There is only one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self. As I continue to have conversations, the answers to most of the questions come back to the reflection in the mirror, our own self. We choose the life we want to lead. Sure, there may be roadblocks and struggles, but we choose how we respond. Last week's action step was to define what you wanted from your dream life. For those of you who regularly listen, you know I have a written life plan. I highly recommend the book Living Forward by Michael Hyatt to help you write yours. I use it with all of my clients. For those of you who are parents, how did school go this past year? What's your plan for the fall? We had no struggles because my kids know how to learn. They're used to taking classes online and on Zoom. They were doing it before COVID. Why? Because it's the 21st century, and the old model of education is rapidly failing. My son is graduating high school. He's got 49 college credits, all of them taken at colleges locally. It saved a ton of money, and it allowed him to move much, much faster. Sitting in a classroom and being told what to think and going at the pace of the slowest learner really isn't appropriate anymore. Even in college itself is fundamentally broken. Changes are happening, and we shall see what comes. We're going to talk about this a little bit in today's episode. And so I want you to pay attention to the conversations of classical education. Today, we're joined by my friend Joshua Lisec, who every day helps authors manifest the mission behind their voice. Joshua is the world's only award-winning, celebrity-recommended, #1 international best-selling certified ghostwriter. He also is a TEDx speaker and a 2-time published novelist, and he has ghostwritten more than 45 books. Let's meet our guest and hear his story. Welcome to Richer Soul, Joshua Lisec. It's great to have you join us today.
Hey, Rocky, I'm thrilled to be here today. Thank you for having me on.
It's my pleasure, and I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yes, yes. So I was homeschooled from preschool through high school. So I can't speak to the public system of education, but I can share kind of what it was like in my world. Growing up with school being in the basement, surrounded by bookcases and bookshelves, a lot of my learning was self-directed. The state, as all states where homeschooling is legal, say, hey, here are the requirements for what you're supposed to learn as a youngster, the tests you're supposed to be able to pass. But beyond that, it was pretty much do whatever you want. And so I remember my parents got from a library book sale the Encyclopedia Americana, Bicentennial Edition, 1976. And being homeschooled and not necessarily having access to a massive network of children for quote unquote socialization, I made the Encyclopedia Americana my playmate, you might say. I read the entire Encyclopedia Americana, A through Z, all 29 volumes, I think there was. The multiple R's and S's volumes. And of course, reading encyclopedia, you learn a little bit about everything. 95% is useless knowledge, the equivalent of junk DNA, but it really does undergird that critical remaining information you pick up that is essential to your own knowledge base, the way you think about history, politics, science, and of course, money. And it always struck me reading these stories, these biographical entries in the encyclopedia of people who created vast wealth after having a very poor upbringing. And of course, I had the question, why did the likes of the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and people who kind of in our American consciousness were these great benefactors of society, billionaires in today's money, worth hundreds of billions even. And to answer that question, I ultimately found my way to a little book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by a different Carnegie, Dale Carnegie. I'm sure that's a book many of you listening are familiar with. That was the essential introduction to money mindset for me. This idea that in order to create wealth for yourself, you have to create wealth for other people. And that, of course, took the form of fulfilling personal relationships and satisfaction, like is taught in How to Win Friends and Influence People. Basically, if you want to be someone people want to be around, treat other people the way that they want to be treated. Act like someone who other people want to be around, and you will attract opportunities. So I was in elementary school when I first read that book, and that was worth more than I would say any home ec class could have been later on in high school. That was really foundational for my money mindset as a youngster.
And that's not normal for a kid to read a book like that. So it's quite unusual. Just out of curiosity, was there a particular system that your parents used to homeschool you? Was it classical education or something different?
It was classical education. So there was Latin, Greek, rhetoric, debate, the great classics, scripture studies, all the good stuff that's not taught in schools but probably should be.
And that is correct, because I thought I remembered that from our conversation when you mentioned you were homeschooled. I remembered thinking, I think he was classically educated, which unfortunately we don't do as much today as we should. It's literally teaching kids how to think instead of what to think. And in many cases, you went back to the original sources to learn from the people instead of getting someone else's opinion of what happened. And so I have been thrilled that my kids were classically educated as well, and that they have that type of underlying skill.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I really latched on to what you just said there, Rocky, about the classical education being what teaches you how to think. Because that is where I would say the roots of my profession today begin to take root, actually, is in learning how to think. Because in order to learn how to think, you need to be able to learn how to write. Because ultimately, writing is thinking on the page. Of course, you're having to coherently put together exactly what it is you mean. So it's a deeper level of analysis. And I think it was Dale Carnegie, actually, who wrote that when you write down what your problem is, this goes for anything in your personal life or professional life. When you articulate the problem on paper, a solution more often than not emerges without doing any initial or additional thinking, just by writing it out. And so part of classical education for my family, my brother and I, was critical writing, essays, research papers, all the stuff that even college kids don't get to do nowadays. We were doing at, 8, 9, 10 years old. And I found that I had a knack for the essay writing and putting thoughts into paper and articulating what we took away from reading a passage in, Silas Marner, or reading the biography of Thomas Jefferson, for example. And so that is what revealed itself to me that, I actually enjoy this writing thing. So I knew it from a very early age that this is probably my gift, something around the written word and communication. And sure enough, that's where I find myself today.
And you were one of the, I call it lucky. Some people are lucky to figure out their gifts early in life and follow that path and have that clarity. Not everyone, some of us spend our whole life trying to figure it out. But you have to take the time and do the work. And the faster you can figure it out, the easier life becomes for you.
That's right. It was at a young age, probably a middle school age, that I decided I wanted to become a professional writer someday, starting with novels. I was deeply impacted by, as a kid, obviously, like many were, by the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Some of his other fiction for adults I enjoyed. And then, of course, the fantastic realm of Middle-earth and Lord of the Rings. And I decided I was going to become a novelist someday. So while I just finished high school, I started working on my first novel, now that I had some time in between part-time job working at the library, of course. Of course, I had to be the library. And taking university classes, I started my first novel, and eventually it turned into a second one, and I got a 2-book publishing deal, and that ultimately launched my career as a writer.
That is impressive. Wow. And to do it at such an early age. So let's... Before we dig in, I do want you to share your weight loss journey, because I also had one where I was able to lose 50 pounds and keep it off. And whenever people have success like that, I always like to hear their story. So,
absolutely. I'd love to share.
Yeah. How were you able to do that?
I'd like to give some kudos to the creator of the Dilbert comic strip, New York Times bestselling author and cavalier political analyst named Scott Adams. He wrote a book a few years ago that was instrumental in my own personal journey. And in that book, he describes systems versus goals, as in you could have a goal to lose weight, get healthy, but unless you have a daily practice, a system which you do every single day, you do not deviate from it, you do not rely on motivation or energy, you just do it no matter what. And the thing is, it's easy to do over and over, so it's sustainable. If you have a system, you will be more likely to achieve your goal. So after I went to college and university, I didn't have the freshman 15, I had the freshman 55. And being a professional writer, working all sorts of crazy hours, freelancing, hustling all across the country, which is how you and I incidentally met. It was at a conference in New York City. And I just found out, you know what, I've got all this weight on. I haven't lost it yet. I've not been sleeping well. I've not been eating well. It was right around the time that my wife and I found out that she was pregnant that I decided, you know what, I am ashamed of my appearance. I'm ashamed that I put on all this weight and that my size currently demonstrates that I don't have a lot of will to change it, to improve my health. And so there's the collective unconscious, right? Well, there was a collective conscience, which was shame. I'm like, I'm ashamed of that. My son could look at his father and say, wow, my dad's unhealthy. It's okay to be unhealthy. So I knew that I would be passing that lesson along if I did not change my behavior. But it wasn't until the goals versus systems approach of Scott Adams that I finally found the way to do that. For me, it was a two-part system. The first piece of the system is the vegan diet. So my wife and I were both vegan. The reason why that is critical as a system to lose weight and keep it off and essentially get all the nutrition your body needs is by the choice of food alone, you've limited your options down to what probably is a vegetable or a nutritious grain. And by now having the rainbow colors on your plate, all sorts of fresh fruits and vegetables and natural protein sources, you're now getting a lot of things that you weren't necessarily getting when I was, eating burritos, wings, and pizza, because those are mostly animal products. So that one system alone eliminated 90% of the junk that I had been putting in my body. Now, that has to do with food choices and proper nutrients. What about calories? What about, losing additional weight? So the first half of my weight loss was from just the vegan diet alone. I hit a plateau there for a little bit. Wasn't seeing much traction once I'd lost about 30 pounds. The remaining 25 of my 55-pound weight loss journey that I've been able to maintain was intermittent fasting. That, within a month and a half, took off 25 pounds. So intermittent fasting, for the uninitiated, is basically where you only eat during a certain window in the day, and you fast for the remaining. So I started doing an 8-hour window where I would eat. Let's say I start eating, around. I'd have breakfast at 10 in the morning, and then I would have dinner, my dinner wrapped up by 6 o'clock. An 8-hour window. Then after a couple of weeks, realized wow, this isn't that hard. I'm a little hungry. I just drink a Zevia or some sparkling water to make my stomach feel full. This isn't that hard. So after a couple of weeks, I went down to a 6-hour window. So I was eating my lunch actually at around 1 p.m. or so, noon or 1, and then having dinner with my family done by 6 or 7 p.m. So that 6-hour window. And then, as I said, after about a month and a half of that, the weight literally just melted off, and there was quite a strange before and after picture in a very short amount of time, before the weight loss and afterwards. So I still keep up both of those systems today, the vegan diet and the intermittent fasting. And frankly, I don't really have to think about it. There's no will. There's no motivation. There's no energy. I don't have to listen to a TEDx talk about the importance of intermittent fasting or anything like that to get up the motivation. I just do it without even thinking about it.
And that's similar to what I did. I do intermittent fasting as well. And it turns out we don't need to eat as much as we think we need to eat. I do have more of a protein-based diet, but again, it's what works for you and what you're happy with. There is no one right answer. There's the answer that you can live with. We all have a diet, whether or not we want to admit it or not. Sometimes we put intentionality behind it and we think about it, and other people just do whatever they choose. But if you want to be healthy, then you've got to appropriately fuel your body. And the food we put in, it's important to pick it well.
That's right.
Were there any other lessons that you learned as part of that weight loss journey?
Yes, it was the surprising superiority of systems over goals. So I graduated from high school in 2008, but it wasn't here until 2019. Basically 11 years later, where health and wellness finally clicked for me. Because for years, it's my goal. I want to lose weight. And I would download recipe guides, and I would try this thing, and I would try that thing, and I would watch exercise videos on YouTube, and I would join the gym, and all of these things that just felt like a lot of effort with very little results. And they required so much motivation to be able to keep up with. Like going to the gym, let's compare that to what I do now. Now I have one homemade kettlebell that I do all of my strength training and a lot of cardio activities for. It's right by the desk that I use it while watching TV a couple of nights a week, and it gets me staying toned as I am. No motivation required. It's right there. I do it. It's a system. One tool, multiple uses. And it's the same with intermittent fasting as opposed to like calorie counting, where it's every piece of food. You have to weigh it, or you have to think, okay, how many calories is this? Is it going to get the right ratio of carbs, fruits, veggies, all, meats, proteins, whatever. But just a 1-2 punch of a vegan diet and intermittent fasting for me has been an incredibly easy system. And every day I am just shocked of how easy it is to weigh the weight that I want to weigh. And it did not take so long to get here. And I just applied it to other areas of life, from money to book writing, which is what I do professionally now, parenting even, where there are simple systems, if you do them consistently, get incredible results over time.
And so that's how I built wealth, was to create an automated savings system. I'd love to hear about your parenting system.
Yes, parenting system. It really is all about consistency with our son, Wesley. He is a few months away from turning 2 years old. So he's a toddler, but he has been potty trained for a couple of months now. So we have a little 20-month-old who's been potty trained. And for boys, they say that it's particularly rare and difficult actually to get a boy potty trained before age 3.5 or even 4. So the fact that we've been able to apply a system to potty training is an example of how it works. So it's, as I said, it's all about consistency. So when we first started potty training Wesley, and this is not a parenting podcast, so I'll get to the point quickly. It is really all about consistency. Even if the child doesn't do the right thing that you wanted to, don't say, oh, okay, well, you had an accident here on day 3, so I guess we'll put you back in diapers. No, wrong. Intermittent fasting. Oh, gee, I wasn't able to keep my 8-hour window today, so I guess I'll have breakfast an hour early tomorrow. Wrong. The point of a system is consistency, even if you're not getting immediate results. With Wesley, we started sign language with him, little baby sign language, pretty much as soon as he was born. It was difficult to keep that up when he had turned a year old and didn't know any of the signs that we had been teaching him for over a year. But it was a couple of weeks after his first birthday, he finally started picking up the sign and started actually initiating. And now we can have not full conversations, but we actually have a communication relationship with our little boy. He can tell us what he wants. He can tell us what he's thinking about, even what he's sad about. It's like a 3-dimensional relationship now, but it was because we kept a system up, even when it didn't feel like it was getting results. And I think how that applies to money, if you're putting money away and you're making a smart investment strategy and you're just doing it over and over, it's not necessarily going to be weeks before you start to see a return, unless you have more of an aggressive risk-oriented strategy where you're trying to get dividends. You're probably not going to see the results of the effort for a little bit, but it feels easy to give up on the system when you don't have immediate attainment of the goal. But when you keep up with the system, you achieve way more goals than you ever thought possible.
And that's very true. We have lots of systems in our house, and everything's on spreadsheets to make life a little bit easier and to get through things. I don't know if you realize this, back in the 60s, 95% of kids were potty trained by the age of 2. And now it's 5%. And I don't know what has changed societally, but maybe there's better diaper commercials. I don't know. But kids used to be potty trained, and somehow we lost that art of teaching them how to use the bathroom.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of the consumer goods industry lobbying pediatric associations. They make recommendations to take longer, but also maybe out of necessity in order to keep up with our grand consumer ambitions, we have to have both parents working outside of the home. So there's no one there during the day, to potty train a child at that early age, like has been done in the past.
And that may be. I don't know the reasons behind it, but it's very interesting. So you've spent your life as a writer, and I know that the power of stories is rather compelling, and being able to tell a good story is an amazing skill to have. A lot of what you do, though, is ghostwriting. Can you explain what a ghostwriter is? Yes.
A ghostwriter is somebody who takes your ideas, your stories, your life lessons, as loosely as connected and as even random as they may be. And through conversation, through the art of the writing process, turns that into a commercially viable, marketable book that is entertaining and educational to the point that people get real world results by reading and applying what they read.
And that's impressive. We've had some people on in the past who've used ghostwriters and gone through the process. One was, I think it was called Book in a Box, where they literally guide you through. And I'm guessing there's an entire process, right, in a system that you use to get this done?
There is a system. Absolutely, absolutely. So as a ghostwriter, every time I'm going to a project, I know that there is this whole industry that exists prior to the new author's book coming about. So when someone comes, they say, hey, I got this idea for a book. I've got some stories. I kind of want to talk about this, talk about that, maybe share about this one time in my childhood when this formative thing happened to me. But I know that there are specific templates for different book categories. Basically, what do readers expect from a book? So that means if you're writing a weight loss book, there are specific expectations that weight loss book readers have that they're bringing to your book. So in this case, it's my job as the ghostwriter to know what those expectations are and see the overlap between what this book needs to be any good for the market they're trying to reach and what the book needs to say in order to get the author's message across. So my job as the ghostwriter is to balance what the author wants to say and what readers are willing to pay for in a book. And we know with certainty 2 ways what readers are willing to pay for. Unlike other ghostwriters and book publishers, I have a 2-part market research process. Number 1 is we go and look at the reviews on books that are in your target market. So let's say you're writing a book on financial planning, maybe financial independence. What are the other books on that topic that your future readers have read? And we look at the neutral reviews, the 2, 3, and 4-star reviews on Amazon, Audible, Goodreads, etc., to really see what people said. Yes, I really like where the author talked about this, but I felt like they overpromised and underdelivered on this critical topic, which was the reason I bought the book in the first place. 2 stars. Right? So we look at those reviews to get a sense of what people are buying books to learn, and we couple that with data from a tool called Publisher Rocket, which syncs with Amazon's bestseller algorithm to tell us in real time what are the keywords that people are typing in the search bar on Amazon, and then go and buying books based on that exact search. So maybe in your case, ways to become financially free, or smart financial planning, or how do I get a financial planner? Keywords like that, right? That may be related to your profession. Well, we put them into this algorithm tool, and it tells us, hey, here is the exact number of searches on average in the past month that were made on Amazon for that keyword. Oh, and by the way, here's how much money in terms of royalties the top 4 authors made by being the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 spots for that keyword in the search results. So we've got the qualitative data and the quantitative data for my statistics nerds who are listening right now. So we use that to inform the writing process. So we're actually writing a book that people are going to buy.
And that's important because most books don't actually have very much in the way of sales. And I don't think people always realize that. I don't even know how many books are coming out faster and faster these days from people, and for a variety of different reasons, but very few make it to the top of the list. And more often than not, there's not really a lot of money in selling a book, is there?
Not on the front end. The average self-published book sells fewer than 100 copies in its lifetime, which lifetime is literally decades. The traditional publishing industry is not that much better, 500 copies on average. But when you look at the royalties, that actually makes that to be the same. 100 copies sold for a self-published author is about the same amount of money as 500 copies sold for a traditionally published author. So speaking generally for authors, there doesn't seem to be a lot of money in the average. Of course, we're talking about the average. There's a lot of books that sell a lot more than that. And then there's quite a few that also sell 3, like the autobiography, where it's like, hey, I just want to share my story with my great grandkids. I don't care if it sells any copies. So, the grandkids buy 3 copies and that's that. Now, back to the question of the quality of books. You're right in that the technology, the opportunities that self-publishing has brought to any aspiring author has lowered the bar of quality that's acceptable to call yourself a published author. So any yahoo can, frankly, write something up in a Word document, reformat that for Kindle, publish it on Amazon, and call themselves a published author. But the proof really is in the pudding, or in this case, in the profits. So the type of books that don't sell really well are the ones that are shoddily thrown together. These are often the books that are based on, frankly, just interviews. So you've got somebody who just interviews an aspiring author, say, hey, what do you want to write about in the book? And they transcribe the interview, fix the typos, claim it has chapters, slap a table of contents on it, and call it a book. People are realizing, and we can see this from the reviews, that those interview-based books don't do the trick because there's usually less material there than in the free content the author posted on YouTube or on their podcast. If you want to know what the author thinks, if they work with a self-publishing outfit that just interviews the author, well, go listen to their free interviews online. Watch their TED Talk, for example. But the books that do really, really well are the ones that are designed to create additional revenue for the author. So if we think about the image of a pyramid, a 3-step pyramid, the bottom step obviously is the biggest one. You see the smaller rectangle or smaller square in the middle, and you've got that little top on it, the 3-step pyramid. For authors who do really, really well, who actually build their business on the book, take the pyramid approach to book revenue. The first layer, of course, is book sales. You want to get as many book sales as possible. And there are specific things that you can do to basically fly past the 100 or 500 copies average. But you want the book to be so good, in fact, too good, that you've given readers so much information that they feel overwhelmed about where to start. And then you just so happen to mention that there's a free resource available to readers on your website that helps them implement the best ideas that they've learned. It could be a webinar. It could be a checklist. It could be downloadable, fillable PDFs. It could be even a free software license, for example, pre-written scripts, maybe if you're in marketing or sales. Go to my website, the author says, download these free tools to quickly and effectively implement what you've learned. You go to the author's website, you download that material there, and you find yourself receiving an offer for a $97 webinar, question and answers with the author, or maybe a $19 a month mastermind membership. That is the second level of the pyramid. It's smaller, meaning there's fewer people, but you don't need to sell that many of your mastermind memberships, for example, to have this be a considerable stream of revenue directly from your book. And then there is the top level of revenue. This is your premium service, your one-on-one work, your coaching or consulting, your DIY offer, where the big money is. This is like a high-ticket service. So someone reads the book. They say, wow, this is so good. I got to get results from this. I love where the author's coming from. Then they go and they join the mastermind. They learn how to implement some of the things themselves. But again, they have more money than, say, time to implement it themselves. Then they reach out to the host of the mastermind, aka the author, and say, hey, can I just have you do this for me? So this simple 3-level pyramid, or to use marketing speak, 3-step funnel, is what creates hundreds of thousands, even $1 million in revenue from a single book. That is what I do with my clients, is we plan the book to send people into the higher levels of the book revenue pyramid, so that is very, very profitable for them, whether that's tens of thousands of dollars in addition to their business, or even in the case of a marketing author who's part of the ClickFunnels community, $1 million in revenue directly from his book in a 12-month period.
Yeah, Russell Brunson's done an amazing job with ClickFunnels and his books and the way he does those types of things. Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. How do you know when you're ready to write a book, or if you even should write a book?
Yeah, that's a great question. The fact is, not everyone should, and I think a lot of us are realizing when we buy these books that are touted as spectacular, we buy them and it reads like a transcription of a phone call. You're like, yeah, this is not a book. I want my money back. So those aren't necessarily the kinds of books. Basically, if you want the cheap, easy approach, as is with anything, if you want to get rich quick from any financial opportunity, you probably shouldn't do it. If you want to get rich quick from writing a book, probably shouldn't do it. So I think that would eliminate a lot of people who shouldn't. We know from a New York Times poll that 81% of people want to write a book. So that's about 8 in 10 of you listening right now. You know who you are. You want to write a book. And so you're listening really intensely to what we're talking about now. How do you know if you should write one? Well, I think if you're going to approach writing a book like any financial decision or investment opportunity, you need to know what the opportunities are actually to make back the money. That means you need to get clear on what your book revenue pyramid looks like. What happens when someone buys a copy of your book? Do you want to have them join your free social media community where they'll learn about your higher offers, maybe your consulting? Do you want to use your book to get people onto your email list? Do you have a software that you want to give the first month away for free and you use the book to talk about that, and that's the offer from your book? Now, the reason why a book is such a powerful tool for all of marketing is it puts all of your ideas in one place. It's basically the Bible of your brand, of you, of your business. And so it is the best tool to pre-handle sales objections you might get. It's the best place to explain your step-by-step strategy with no steps skipped. And you can't necessarily do that in even a 1-hour webinar. You'll be able to share the stories you've never shared before because you haven't quite felt or found the right place to do that. You can do all of that in a book. But the question is, should you write a book? Then the answer is, if you have your book revenue pyramid in mind. You know what's going to happen when someone says, wow, this book is really good. Now I want more. If you know what the more you can give them, or at least have some ideas about it, even if you haven't created a mastermind program yet, even if you just have a one-on-one service, you have to have something in order for this to be a return on investment opportunity. And even if you only sell 5 copies, you can still make back your money. I'll give you an example. I know a plastics engineering author. So his background is in plastics engineering. He has never sold a single copy of his book. It's something like 2 million on the bestsellers list on Amazon in his category. But he makes about $50,000 from his book every single year by sending it out, basically an autographed copy in the mail to his top prospects in his industry for whom he'd like to pitch his consulting services. And he gets about 10 clients a year for $5,000 each just by mailing out a copy of his autographed book. So he has a really simple book revenue pyramid, and book sales aren't even it. It's like shipping out 100 copies a year. So that's the simplest form of a book revenue pyramid that you need to consider writing a book a wise opportunity.
Do all books have to be written, though, for a business purpose, or can we write books for other reasons?
A book can actually serve multiple purposes. I'll give you an example. There is a very well-known professional financial planner in South Africa. He and I have a non-disclosure agreement, so I'm not at liberty to reveal his name. But he does work with the few largest investment firms there in South Africa. Now, in his case, he came to me saying, you know, he's looking towards retirement. His children have graduated, and he has several decades of financial planning experience, helping people invest in their own homeland of South Africa. And he came to me and said, Joshua, it's time to write my legacy. Those are his words. He actually said, write his legacy. And he came to me with ideas about teaching his financial planning strategies down to the granular of how to budget every single month. And also saying, I want to share about my Christian faith as well, how that's important to me. I want to share my upbringing, and I want to share this and that. It was all kind of this mishmash of things that he wanted to share. And he's like, do I have 3 books here? Do I have 1 book? How do I do this and not offend people who don't share my faith or feel like I'm just going off and sharing stories that no one cares about? And because there is a winning book template for every book category, in this case, his primary category is financial planning, we followed the book template, writing the book, taking his stories and ideas, and working them in such a way that he is accomplishing his mission of writing a legacy. It's primarily for people who want to be able to plan their finances. So it's like 80% having a business purpose, but the other 20%, the examples, him sharing personally, reflect on his faith, his values, his upbringing, which is really the prime motivation for him writing the book in the first place. So here we have a book that fulfills a commercial purpose. It teaches the everyday South African person how to basically create a wonderful nest egg using investment opportunities in South Africa right now. And he also fulfills his personal satisfaction purpose, which is sharing his faith and his values and stories from his life. So a book can serve multiple purposes. It just has to check quite a few boxes. It has to follow, what is it? A book writing system to do so.
And are these systems widely available, or are they somewhat proprietary?
In my case, they are proprietary because I've ghostwritten over 45 books in my career now, which is a lot more than your average scribe or writer. And the great thing about that experience is that it has taught me what works and what doesn't. What works better than, well, what doesn't work at all. And in that experience, I found different ways. I've worked with traditional publishers. I've talked directly with and interacted with, bounced ideas off of acquisitions editors, copy editors at the big 5 publishers here in North America. And so I've learned what they look for in a manuscript, some of the tells of terrible writing, but even surprising truths that make a manuscript fantastic. For example, often professionals want to write at a higher level, use sophisticated vocabulary. But if you want a book to sell really, really well, you have to write at the 5th grade level or below. Basically, can a 10-year-old from the public school system understand what you're saying and apply it? Now, that's not necessarily what you would expect for a book on financial planning, like writing it for a 10-year-old. But that's something you have to take into account. So that's part of my book writing system, is taking what I know works for what's worked for my authors in the past and what works with the biggest names in publishing right now, and I've converted those into templates for different genres like self-help or business or marketing, sales, financial planning even.
And that's interesting. I think part of the reason maybe that you've got to write at that level is to make it simple and understanding. It's not that you're writing below people. It's just that when you write with that level of basic clarity, it just becomes easier for people to follow along because they're not having a conversation. They can't ask you a clarifying question, right? They've got to be able to figure it out based on what you've laid out for them.
That's absolutely right. And it's kind of a funny lesson for how effective speaking and writing at that level is, there was an analysis done of the 2016 presidential debates here in the United States between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Interestingly enough, Hillary Clinton spoke at a 9th grade level. Donald Trump spoke at a 3rd grade level.
He had a slogan, right, that was positive and simple, and that was a hook that worked well. I know Hillary struggled in that last election, and it wasn't until she actually met, I think Cialdini was helping her come up with the right messaging and creating the sales process for her to better connect with her audience.
That's right. Anytime you can simplify, you're going to be more persuasive. And it's not just the word choice, it's the order of the ideas that you bring to the author, or you as the author bring to readers. So there's some books that you open up and start reading the introduction, and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how to wrap my head around what they're talking about right now. But the best books are those that are structured to ease people into the topic and again get them rapidly hooked, familiar with the landscape, knowing what to expect, and then are excited to continue the journey with you. So even writing at the 5th grade level is not just, use a copy checker or go to Microsoft Word and see what grade level you're at. It's also making a book structured in such a way that literally anyone could pick it up and read the thing and execute and get the results that you promise.
So what hooks people into the book that keeps them reading?
Yes. It has to do in large part with what's in the opening chapter for a reason. I like to think of the opening chapter, whether you call it introduction, chapter 1, even whatever you call it. It is basically the sales letter for the book. And the reason why the opening chapter must sell the book itself is because of how readers go about buying a book. What do? If you're on the Kindle app, you download a free sample. If you're on Amazon or on Apple iBooks or on Google Play, wherever you're browsing, even in the store, what's the first thing you do is you flip the book open and you read the opening chapter. So the opening chapter must make the case for buying the book, but more specifically, actually reading the book, digesting the ideas, and then taking action on it. So there's several things that an introduction for a book has to do in order to succeed. And I'll define them in one simple word, and that is credibility. The opening chapter must demonstrate the credibility of the author. That doesn't mean you get up there in the introduction and you just talk about all your accolades and accomplishments like it's a resume turned into a chapter. What you share is your lived experience. What has been your journey from where you were, that is, where the readers are, some of the things they're struggling with now, and then how did you, Cliff Notes version, get to point B? How did you ascend the mountain, accomplish your goal, leave your legacy? And what are some of the things you battled with along the way? If you are a coach or a consultant, or maybe let's say a psychologist, a professor, an advisor, and it's not necessarily you have personally gone on the journey, it's been one of your patients or your clients or your students, then that is the story that you would share. It's how you coached and guided them. This is classic hero's journey, Obi-Wan Kenobi meets Luke Skywalker, storytelling, but made apparent for nonfiction. So in order to sell people on the book, you have to sell people on wanting to follow your story and having your story and their story come together so that you can ultimately model the same results that the author got. And that's just the opening chapter right there.
You make it sound so easy, but it's not. It's
a system is what it is.
It is. And you've got to understand the system and follow the system. And we all think we're smarter than the system. And so that's where the trouble begins. It's that we don't always do exactly what we're supposed to. We make things more difficult. If you just do things in a simple way, you get the results. But we all try to, we try to put too much into it sometimes. So I've noticed that nowadays, especially in the blogging world, in the article world, and on the internet, they're talking about AI writing, where there are now programs that can actually write articles based on very little input. Have you heard anything about that?
I have, yes. Quite a few professional writers, journalists, basically anyone who has to write for a living is either terrified of them or is psyched about them. Terrified in that it's possible that their job will be taken away by something that just generates articles based on, let's say, certain search criteria like keywords, or taking facts from other articles and condensing them and turning it into something that's readable at a certain grade level for a certain audience using specific examples. These are very powerful tools. I know that Elon Musk's initiative called, I believe it's OpenAI, they built one and had plans to release it into the public for public use. I think this was back in around early 2018, late 2017, around that time. The backlash was horrendous, and that people were saying, this is like automated cars replacing automobiles and trucks. This is mass unemployment within entire industries. People no longer being needed. So they pulled back on releasing that. There are other software-based solutions that are out there for this. But I have taken advantage of the new technology to design my own proprietary solution for authors. So what does that look like for me as a ghostwriter? What I do is I want every author's content to read as if they wrote it. If you were to go and look at the reviews on my author's Amazon pages, on their book profiles, you will hear things like, the writing style is so good, it's so true to them. Oh, it was so wonderful. My authors have said to me personally things like, Joshua, when I share with my spouse or with my clients or with my kids the chapters that you've been working on, they're like, wow, you're a really, really good writer. This feels totally like you. And of course, there's no sign that they work with a ghostwriter. I've got a few testimonials from clients who've come public about working with me who said in their testimonial videos, Joshua, I couldn't even tell I worked with a ghostwriter because it all sounded like me. It was just the best versions of my ideas. So that was pretty cool to hear. And I credit the software solution I've developed to be a large part of that. Basically, it's stylometric analysis, which is the data science of writing style, author voice. All of us have our own unique speech patterns, our own written content, oral and verbal communication styles that differentiate us from one another. And what I do is I pick up on what makes your voice unique. For example, your ratio of active to passive verb choices, the types of analogies that you use, where and how you like to use prepositions, how you rely on adverbs to or not to make your verbs more powerful. Are you an auditory communicator? You like to talk about how things hear or seem? Are you the one who says things like, let's have a look at that, and you're more so visual? Or are you kinesthetic and that you like to communicate in terms of how ideas take up space and how they feel, and really address the topic from that orientation? So there's a lot that goes into the science of author voice, and it ultimately results in you as the author reading a chapter I ghostwrote for you, and you say, wow, I feel like I wrote this myself. I can truly say I wrote my book because that's exactly how it feels to me.
That's impressive. And it's just impressive how much thought and effort go behind that, and at the level of detail that you're actually going into in looking at the way they speak and they talk and do that. And I think to that, and I'm like, I wonder if I should spend more time like recording myself and listening back to myself as I talk to people to better understand how I do things, right? And is it serving me the best way that it should? Because our words drive our actions and our habits and our outcomes. And I've been reading and studying a lot about that, and I'm thinking that would be interesting to do, just to get a better understanding. Are there any automated services out there that are not that expensive that people could use to kind of talk into and see what it told them about themselves?
There's a few tools that I think of offhand that are useful. One of which is called the Hemingway Editor, which is available at hemingwayapp.com. hemingwayApp.com, named after Ernest Hemingway, of course. And it's a really simple way that just analyzes the readability of your writing. So it tells you what grade you're writing at. Are you at Trump's grade 3 or Hillary's grade 9 or somewhere in between, or grade 12 even? And it gives you simple things like letting you know if there's maybe a more powerful way to use that verb, if a sentence is hard to read because it's 100 words long, really simple things like that. And the tool actually is free. It is a cloud-based tool, so you just go to the website, hemingwayapp.com, start using it, and it'll help make your writing more readable.
How much does that, because I use Grammarly just for my normal stuff because I'm horrible at getting my words down on paper. Is it much different or is it similar?
I would say it has less, but less is more. I know tools like Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid, you can get lost in all the bells and whistles, but with Hemingway Editor, free app that tells you, hey, can you use a more powerful verb here? Should you use possibly active voice instead of passive? Is there a simpler way to say something? So instead of utilize, could you just write the word use? Don't need all the next syllables in there. And then are there hard to read sentences that you should just rewrite or break up or reword to make easier to read? The real simple, just those 5 features it tells you, and it's a great way to quickly make writing more clear.
I will have to check it out. I'm working on my writing skills. There's a reason I podcast and not write blog posts. It's much easier for me to be verbal than it is for me to write everything out and to do that and to understand all the principles that you know so well because of how you were educated. And I've noticed that with my kids because of how they've been taught to write. They're actually phenomenal at doing that.
Hey, that's one of the great positive outcomes of homeschooling.
It is. And I don't think people realize that when you're stuck in a curriculum that doesn't allow kids to explore, it's quite limiting. You mentioned early on that you did a TEDx talk. I'd be interested in learning about that experience and what that was like.
Yes. Well, I did the TEDx Erie. They're in Erie, Pennsylvania. They're in your state. It's a short drive over from where I live in Ohio. So the question of the day is, how did I get a TEDx talk? Well, anytime you are applying to audition, so you don't just audition, you have to apply to audition. And if they like your audition, the selection committee for that TEDx event will pick you. And there's usually anywhere from hundreds to thousands of people who apply. And there's anywhere from 4 to 10 people who get picked ultimately. So the chances of actually giving a TEDx talk are really, really low unless you can pitch a killer TEDx talk. And that is what I will teach you how to do with 3 simple questions. And these are the questions that appear on every TEDx application, whether it is TEDx Erie or TEDx New York City. These 3 simple questions also apply to other areas of life, such as, what is your legacy financially, spiritually? How do you describe your book as an author? What's your elevator pitch for your book? What's your elevator pitch for your product? This set of questions has profound applications if you can answer them right. So the first question every TEDx application asks that you must ace is, what is your big idea worth sharing? That question will tell whether or not you actually have a big idea. Now, in my case, for my TEDx talk, my big idea was to the effect of millennials need to find their own corporate ladder. Or essentially, millennials need to create their own dream job from scratch because the traditional path to success no longer exists. That's a pretty big idea, saying that like an entire generation of people should create their own way, create their own income opportunities. So the promise was pretty big. It was eyebrow raising to the point of saying, wow, I want to watch this guy's audition. I want to seriously consider him. So what is your big idea if you would like to become a TEDx speaker that's worth sharing, meaning that it will positively impact other people? This is a great question to answer in terms of your book that you're writing or for the business that you're building, for your brand, your product, whatever, is what is the big idea behind this thing that make this thing, this book, this TEDx talk worth sharing? So that's the first question. The second question to get a TEDx talk that, again, applies to other areas of life where persuasion is necessary is, why is your big idea necessary right now? So this has to do with the urgency, with the relevance, with why should anyone care about this thing like right now? So I expanded on my first answer to the first question to get the TEDx talk that I spoke at, the TEDx event that I spoke at, which is basically that millennials should create their own career opportunities. I expanded on that, talking about how at that time I referenced a couple of statistics showing how the generation of millennials was recently identified as being as having the fewest economic opportunities for advancement in the last 100 years worth of previous generations. I went on to talk about how 50% of the workforce is now working a part-time gig on the side. They're literally self-employed. So the statistic was super recent to the fact that the traditional W-2 full-time 8-to-5 job is not cutting it for half of America. The fact that within a year of graduation, the overwhelming majority of millennials are earning $10 an hour or less with a university degree. 80%. It's stunning statistics that really pounded home the point that this big idea is really, really important right now. So to answer that second question, think about why your big idea for a talk, for a book, is so important right now. If you were an author answering this question, you would tuck this data, these statistics proving the necessity of your book. You would stick them on the back cover of the book and the overview, the synopsis. You might also put them in the introduction of the book. But that question is essential for answering on a TEDx Talk application. And then the third question gets to credibility. Why are you the person to share this big idea? And that, of course, is what's your lived experience, which can include accomplishments, qualifications, credentials. So I went on to explain that I graduated with multiple college degrees, believing that I was destined to make it in the corporate world. And the experience, frankly, was just awful. It's not that I couldn't climb the career ladder. There was no ladder. Many millennials can relate to that experience of getting their first quote unquote real job, and there's nowhere up out of there. It's like, well, here you are, there's management, there's 6-figure earners at the top, and then there's you, and there's no way to get from here to there. I then shared in that text box on the application form about how I took my skills as a writer from being homeschooled and learning critical writing and critical thinking, and I turned that into first a quality side gig, then into a sustainable freelance business, and then into a full-fledged ghostwriting enterprise. So I had actually gone from point A to point B. I'm convincing myself to write a book about this right now, Rocky.
I was going to say, we probably could have spent the entire episode on that one topic. It's interesting because I'm a bit older, and now as you mention that, I realize that we used to have a lot more layers in companies, a lot more middle management. And essentially, in many industries, they've been wiped out. They've flattened those things. And so there is no place to kind of go from the bottom to somewhere next and then kind of follow that ladder up. And that shifted with my generation, because the generation before me was, hey, you go to work for this big company and you stay there your entire life. You get a pension and you retire, and that totally disappeared and changed over my lifetime. Now everyone's hopping everywhere from place to place, and it's a whole new world out there. But I think your underlying premise, though, is very true. You have to build your ladder and your success. And that's what I tell my kids. It's like, college is okay, but why don't you get out and start doing stuff and learning how to interact with the market and sell your skills and provide value and figure out more skills that the world is looking for.
That's right. In fact, this point in the conversation right now is a living example of a big idea worth sharing. I shared it, and it got you talking.
And that's the important thing. So I always like to ask people for an action step. What is something that the listeners can do this week to move forward?
I would say a system to document your legacy. That's what this podcast, this movement is all about, is not just leaving a legacy like it's all about after you're dead, but it's about living a legacy. A legacy is the consequences, the outcomes of what you do today. So I have my own legacy system. One of them actually was every day before my son was born, during my wife's pregnancy, I recorded a short video every day sharing a lesson with my future kid about my experience, my life, my upbringing. So there's this whole library in Google Drive, Google Photos, of all these many, many dozens of lessons of a man about to become a father. And of course, is my son. So that'll be a cool legacy gift to him someday. But a legacy system to document my legacy now that I think is relevant for my business, and I would love to pass on to all of you right now, is content creation. Getting your ideas, your expertise out into the world. Maybe it's having a conversation to talk about writing a profitable, marketable book this week. Maybe it is doing what I do, which is producing content on YouTube. I take some of the most commonly searched keywords about writing books, marketing books, publishing books, and I answer them in videos. I've got like 130, I think, videos up on my YouTube channel now that have tens of thousands of views collectively. That is a great way to ultimately generate business, but also pre-handle objections you might have if you're talking about like a business topic related to what you do for a living. Or if you have a meaningful topic, maybe a personal or a spiritual topic, just turn the webcam on, open your phone, start talking, hit record, and publish it on your YouTube channel. One video a week, minimum.
And I think for a lot of people, that's scary. For me, this podcast is basically building a legacy for my kids. So they see how I think and how I've done something, and stories come up about how life has changed and the things that we do. And so it kind of fulfills that mission as well.
That's right. And when it comes to video content creation or anything that's putting yourself out there and how scary it might be, when it comes to YouTube and or other, whatever platform you're publishing on, know that the first few pieces probably nobody's going to read or watch. My very first video is over 5 years old now. I think it has 12 views. But one of my most recent ones has, I think, 1,600 views. So, it really shakes out. Just know that your first few videos, your first few attempts, they're going to be terrible. Publish them anyway. Once you get to your third, fourth, or fifth video where you're answering a question that people have about your business, your industry, you are talking about a common sales objection, or you're sharing a story that you think would be worth sharing out there with the world, either for your kids or for an audience of some sort, it's going to get easier the more you do, as is with any system.
That it is. You just start and go. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
My secret to living an abundant life is reflected in this episode, which is systems of abundance. Rather than being the guy who tries to time the market or find that one great deal or that one big client, that one thing, like the winning of the lottery, whatever it looks like, I would rather work with a system that is more likely to produce abundance.
Yeah, you just have to create the right steps and actions and just keep doing them day by day. And over time, they compound and you get to your goal. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
What I learned later in life that I wish I would have learned sooner is that not everyone who acts trustworthy is.
I struggle with this one because I always feel like, how do you know, right? You can't know until you're in a situation that's bad. Because when things are good, everything seems okay. And so it's difficult to discern. But that is probably very true. And for you, because you're a ghostwriter, you probably know some stories that I won't ask you about today.
Yes, and you would be you probably not be surprised, but it would be surprising to most people just how I will use the word ethics free so many of the rich and famous, and even those who claim to be faithful are. But you don't know that until you really get to know the person.
And that is true. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would give a piece of career advice specifically around selling. So this is another lesson that I've learned, but I think I would really love to pass it along to my 18-year-old or younger son, Wesley. And that would be to sell expensive stuff. The fact is, if you're selling a $50, and this has been my experience, so I'll speak from experience. It's easier to sell a $50,000 ghostwriting, ghost publishing, book marketing, and PR package. It's easier to sell that than a $50 retainer blog article writing service.
And that is surprising, but it is true. If people would like to find you and connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure thing. If you'd like to learn more about how to write a commercially viable and profitable book, you can head on over to my ghostwriting business website, which is entrepreneurswordsmith.com. Entrepreneurs is plural, and Word and Smith are simply Word and Smith. Entrepreneurswordsmith.com. Right there on the home page, I have the book revenue pyramid set up for you. It allows you to calculate how much you could actually make from your book if you were to write and publish the thing today. I've also got a free book ideas generator tool that allows you to take some vague ideas you have for a book, type them into a little AI tool, and it spits out a winning book idea it's based on the formulas of New York Times best-selling books. Both of those tools are free, no email opt-in required. You can find them both at entrepreneurswordsmith.com.
And I will put the links in the show notes to make it easy for people to check it out. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure thing, Rocky. It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
That was an awesome conversation. So, what's your story and what are you doing to share it? For me, this podcast creates a legacy for my kids to see how I think and interact. It also allows me to connect with so many amazing people. We chatted a little bit about education and raising the next generation. What steps are you taking to build a family dynasty that allows for generational wealth? Are you teaching your kids what to think or how to think? It's a major issue with young people today. Being triggered by a different viewpoint or shutting down other voices instead of understanding and thinking. As always, we have an action step. This week's is to create a system for your legacy. You already see how I'm doing it. You see how Joshua's doing it. So, what are you doing and how will you accomplish this? You have to create systems in all parts of your life to achieve the goals you want. You know, I love systems and spreadsheets to get stuff done, along with my Google Calendar. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. I can help you achieve your dreams through coaching and accountability. Just email me or use the scheduling link in the show notes, and we can start with a short chat to see if you're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. Let's connect on the Facebook page or Facebook group for Richer Soul. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.